Part 1. First Contact and Final Hope. The stars above Earth's lunar base Alpha flickered and died, one by one, as if being devoured by an invisible force. Dr. Sarah Chen stood transfixed at the observation dome, her breath fogging the reinforced glass as she watched the impossible scene unfold. 20 years of astronomical research hadn't prepared her for this moment. "They're here," she whispered, her voice trembling. The void between the stars seemed to ripple, and through that distortion emerged a vessel that defied human understanding. It was organic yet mechanical, its surface shifting like liquid metal under the harsh lunar light. The entire base erupted into controlled chaos. Military personnel rushed to their stations while civilian scientists scrambled to gather data. In the command center, General Marcus Rivera maintained his composure, though his knuckles were white as he gripped the edge of the tactical display. The alien ship made no aggressive moves. Instead, it transmitted a signal, not radio waves or light pulses, but something else entirely. Something that somehow bypassed their communication systems and manifested directly in their minds. They called themselves the Meridians, and they had crossed half the galaxy not to conquer, but to beg. "Your species possesses something unique," the alien consciousness explained, its thoughts translating into words that each human heard in their native language. "Something that might save us all." The Meridians revealed the truth. A cosmic horror known as the Void Swarm was consuming entire civilizations. These beings existed partially outside normal spacetime, making them nearly impossible to fight with conventional weapons. The Meridian Alliance, a coalition of 17 advanced species, had been fighting a losing war for centuries. "But why us?" General Rivera demanded, his tactical mind already analyzing potential scenarios. "We've barely reached our own moon. Our technology is primitive compared to yours." The answer came not in words but in images. Humans adapting to every environment on Earth, surviving catastrophes, learning from failures, and most importantly, thinking in ways that no other species had evolved to consider. "Your neural patterns are chaos made manifest," the Meridian consciousness continued. "Where we see patterns, you see possibilities. Where we follow logic, you embrace intuition. Your species thinks in fractal patterns that mirror the very nature of our enemy." Dr. Chen's scientific skepticism warred with the evidence before her eyes. "You're saying our greatest weakness, our unpredictability, could be our greatest strength." "Precisely. Your military history alone contains strategies that have never been attempted in stellar warfare. Your concept of guerrilla warfare, of asymmetric combat, of psychological operations, these are alien to most species we know." The implications were staggering. Humanity, barely spacefaring, might hold the key to saving the galaxy. General Rivera exchanged glances with Dr. Chen, both understanding the weight of this moment. Earth's divisions seemed petty now, faced with extinction-level threats from beyond the stars. The United Earth Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from every nation gathered virtually to face humanity's greatest decision. The Meridians waited patiently, their ship hovering silently above the moon, a constant reminder of what was at stake. The debate was fierce but surprisingly brief. Faced with irrefutable evidence of both alien life and an existential threat, humanity did what it had always done best: adapted. "We accept," announced the council president, her voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "But we have conditions. We won't be just your soldiers. We want full access to your technology, your knowledge. If we're fighting for the galaxy, we're fighting as equals." The Meridian ship pulsed with colors beyond human perception. "Accepted, though we must warn you, the integration of our technologies will not be simple. Many of our advances are based on fundamental laws of physics your species hasn't yet discovered." General Rivera stepped forward, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Good thing we humans love a challenge. Dr. Chen, assemble your best teams. We need to understand everything they can teach us, and fast." "Already on it," she replied, her fingers flying over her tablet. But we should also show them what we know. Our history is full of victories against supposedly superior forces. The next 48 hours were a blur of activity. While the world's governments prepared their populations for the announcement of alien contact, military and scientific leaders began the monumental task of integrating human and meridian knowledge. The next 48 hours were a blur of activity. While the world's governments prepared their populations for the announcement of alien contact, military and scientific leaders began the monumental task of integrating human and meridian knowledge. The Meridians were fascinated by human military history. The Battle of Thermopylae, the Vietnamese guerrilla tactics, the solar-powered drones that revolutionized modern warfare. Each example sparked intense discussion and analysis. But it was during a casual conversation that Dr. Chen made the breakthrough that would change everything. You're telling me the Void Swarm has never encountered electronic warfare? Jamming? Decoys? The Meridian representatives' confusion was apparent even through their alien manner of communication. Such concepts would be considered dishonorable by most spacefaring races. General Rivera laughed out loud. Then they're in for one hell of a surprise. Honor is great for parades. War is about winning. As the first human volunteers began training with Meridian technology, it became clear that humanity's greatest asset wasn't their potential to learn new technologies. It was their ability to use those technologies in ways their creators had never imagined. The Void Swarm was coming. But for the first time in centuries, the galaxy had hope. Because sometimes survival doesn't depend on being the strongest or most advanced. Sometimes it depends on being willing to break all the rules. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was breaking rules. The human factor. Lieutenant Maya Patel stood in the cavernous hangar of the Meridian dreadnought Stellar Dawn, watching as human engineers swarmed over alien vessels like ants on a sugar cube. 3 months had passed since first contact, and humanity's integration into the galactic war effort was proceeding at a pace that stunned their alien allies. Your people modify our ships with disturbing enthusiasm, observed Corin, her Meridian liaison. The alien's crystalline form shimmered with patterns that Maya had learned to recognize as amusement. You gave us anti-gravity technology and expected us not to play with it. Maya grinned, gesturing toward a nearby fighter craft. Where once it had been sleek and standardized, it now bristled with additional modules and improvised modifications. Besides, your engineers built these ships to be perfect. That's the problem. Corin's crystalline surface rippled with confusion patterns. Perfection is problematic. In warfare, predictability equals vulnerability. Maya explained. Your ships are amazing, but they all follow the same design philosophy. The Void Swarm has adapted to your tactics because they're too consistent. We're changing that. The modifications weren't merely physical. Human software engineers had introduced chaos theory algorithms into Meridian targeting systems, making their weapon patterns less predictable. Electronic warfare suites, considered primitive by Meridian standards, were being integrated into their advanced communications networks. But the real revolution came from an unexpected source: video games. You're telling me this combat simulation was designed for entertainment? The Meridian War Council's collective consciousness radiated disbelief as they watched footage of human pilots running combat scenarios in virtual reality. Gaming taught us something valuable, General Rivera explained. When humans play, we experiment. We try impossible things. We learn from failure without the consequences of actual combat. And most importantly, we share what works. The Council couldn't argue with the results. Human pilots, despite their relative inexperience with advanced technology, were achieving unprecedented success rates in simulated encounters with Void Swarm entities. Their tactics defied conventional logic, but they worked. Dr. Chen's research team had made their own breakthrough. The Void Swarm doesn't just exist partially outside space-time, she announced during an emergency briefing. They're quantum entangled. That's why traditional weapons are so ineffective. You're not fighting individual entities, you're fighting one organism existing in multiple locations simultaneously. How does this help us? Corin asked, their crystalline form pulsing with intense interest. Because quantum entanglement has limitations, Dr. Chen smiled. And humans have been theorizing about weaponizing quantum mechanics since the 20th century. The first real test of humanity's innovations came sooner than anyone expected. A void swarm force emerged near the Arcturus colony, a crucial supply point for the Meridian Alliance. The defense fleet was hours away. The only forces in range were a small squadron of modified fighters led by Lieutenant Patul. Squadron, this is Artemis Lead. Maya's voice was steady as she addressed her mixed human Meridian fighter group. Remember the simulations. They expect us to follow standard Meridian combat protocols. Let's show them something new. The void swarm entities emerged from subspace like living shadows, their forms defying the laws of physics. In previous encounters, Meridian forces would have formed a defensive sphere, focusing fire on individual targets. Instead, Maya's squadron scattered in seemingly random patterns. Electronic warfare suites active, Maya commanded. Deploy the quantum disruptors. The modified Meridian fighters released clouds of engineered particles, specifically designed to interfere with quantum entanglement. The void swarm entities reacted with visible confusion, their coordinated movements becoming erratic. They're destabilizing, Maya observed. Time for Phase 2. Launch the void mines. Another human innovation, weapons designed to create localized disruptions in spacetime, turning the void swarm's natural advantage against them. The entities tried to shift partially out of normal space, their usual defensive tactic. Instead, they found themselves trapped between dimensions. All units, weapons-free. Fire at will. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. Maya's squadron didn't just defeat the void swarm force. They annihilated it, without losing a single fighter. More importantly, they proved that the enemy could be beaten with the right tactics. The footage of the battle spread through the Meridian Alliance like wildfire. Species that had been hesitant about working with primitive humans suddenly became eager supporters. The Meridian War Council immediately ordered the mass production of human-design modifications and weapons. But Maya knew this was just the beginning. During the debriefing, she noticed the void swarm had already started adapting to their tactics. They would need more innovations, more unconventional solutions. The good news, she reported, is that they're learning to fear us. The bad news is that fear makes any enemy more dangerous. General Rivera nodded grimly. Then we'll have to be more dangerous than their fears. Dr. Chen, how's Project Mindstorm coming along? Dr. Chen's expression was both excited and worried. We're ready for the first test. But sir, if this works, we're not just changing how we fight the void swarm. We're changing the fundamentals of warfare itself. Good, Rivera replied. Because conventional warfare isn't working. It's time to change the rules of the game entirely. As Maya left the briefing room, she caught Corin studying the battle footage again. The Meridian's crystalline surface was displaying patterns she'd never seen before. What are you thinking? She asked. I am thinking, Corin replied, that perhaps perfection is not what we should have been striving for all these centuries. Perhaps chaos, human chaos, is exactly what the galaxy needed. Maya smiled. Trust me, Corin. You haven't seen anything yet. Operation Mindstorm. The laboratory deep within asteroid-based Prometheus hummed with an energy that made the air feel electric. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before a containment chamber housing something that shouldn't exist, a captured void swarm fragment. The entity writhed within its quantum containment field, its form shifting between states of matter like a fever dream. Are you certain about this? The Meridian High Command's representative, Valor, directed their thoughts toward the assembled human research team. Attempting to communicate with the void swarm has driven stronger species to madness. Dr. Chen adjusted her neural interface, a hybrid of human and Meridian technology. That's because you tried to communicate with logic. We're trying something different. She turned to her colleague. Dr. Rashid, explain the theory. Dr. Amira Rashid stepped forward, her dark eyes intense. The void swarm exists partially outside our space-time continuum, yes, but they still interact with our reality. That means they must possess some form of consciousness we can reach. The key isn't in the method of communication. It's in the message itself. The team had spent months studying human psychological warfare techniques, from ancient Roman salt rituals to modern cyber operations. But their breakthrough came from an unexpected source: human art and music. The void swarm operates on quantum harmonics, Dr. Chen explained. Their very existence creates patterns in subspace that we've been interpreting as random noise. But they're not random. They're expressions. The void swarm isn't just fighting us. They're singing their victory. Lieutenant Maya Patel, newly promoted after her squadron success, leaned forward. So we're going to what? Sing back. In a manner of speaking, Dr. Chen gestured to the massive array of quantum resonators surrounding the containment chamber. We're going to introduce discord into their harmony. Not just electronic warfare, but psychological warfare on a quantum level. General Rivera watched from the observation deck, his expression thoughtful. You're talking about weaponizing human creativity itself. Exactly. Art, music, poetry. They're all patterns that follow rules while simultaneously breaking them. They're ordered chaos, just like human consciousness itself. The first test began at 300 hours. The quantum resonators activated, channeling patterns derived from everything from Bach to bebop, from abstract expressionism to indigenous art forms. The void swarm fragment reacted violently at first, its form becoming even more chaotic. Then something extraordinary happened. The entity began to resonate in sync with the human patterns, but not in harmony, in discord. Its quantum structure showed signs of stress. It's working, Dr. Rashid whispered. The discord is affecting its quantum cohesion. We're not just communicating with it, we're disrupting its very nature. The implications were staggering. If they could disrupt individual void swarm entities this way, they might be able to affect the entire quantum entangled collective. But they would need something bigger than laboratory tests. Operation Mindstorm was born. The plan was audacious. A massive fleet action combined with the largest quantum resonance array ever constructed. The Meridian Alliance committed its resources fully, finally convinced by the laboratory results. For 2 months, ships were retrofitted with quantum resonators, while human artists and musicians worked with scientists to create the most disruptive patterns possible. The target was the void swarm's primary staging area in the Carina Nebula. Intelligence suggested the largest concentration of entities had gathered there, preparing for a major offensive. This is either going to be the turning point of the war, Maya told her squadron, or the most spectacular failure in military history. The battle began conventionally enough. The Alliance fleet engaged the void swarm with traditional tactics, drawing them into position. The entities responded predictably, their confidence born from countless victories. That confidence was their undoing. All ships, activate quantum resonators. General Rivera commanded from his flagship. Begin broadcast on my mark. The resonators powered up across thousands of ships simultaneously. The nebula itself seemed to shudder as patterns of human creativity. Art, music, dance, poetry, all translated into quantum frequencies, crashed into the void swarm's consciousness. The effect was immediate and devastating. The entity's perfect coordination fractured. Their quantum-entangled consciousness, attacked by patterns it couldn't predict or adapt to, began to unravel. They're not just disconnecting, Dr. Chen reported, monitoring the readings. They're experiencing existential terror. We're not just disrupting their communication. We're showing them concepts their consciousness can't process. Individual entities began to flee, their retreat hasty and uncoordinated. Others seemed to fold in on themselves, their forms collapsing as their quantum cohesion failed. The mighty Void Swarm, terror of the galaxy, was experiencing fear for the first time. But victory came at a cost. The intense quantum frequencies were affecting the human ships as well. Hull breaches were reported across the fleet as metal fatigue set in. Several resonators overloaded catastrophically. "We can't maintain this level of broadcast," Dr. Rashid warned. "The systems are reaching critical levels." "We don't need to," General Rivera replied, his voice firm. "Look." The Void Swarm was in full retreat, but something had changed fundamentally. The entities weren't just fleeing. They were different. Their very nature had been altered by exposure to human creativity. In the aftermath, as damage reports came in and casualties were counted, Dr. Chen made another discovery. The captured fragment in the laboratory had changed too. Its chaotic movements had taken on a new pattern, one that almost seemed to be attempting to mimic human art. "We didn't just drive them back," she realized. "We've introduced chaos into their perfect order. We've infected them with humanity." The implications were both thrilling and terrifying. The war was far from over, but its nature had changed irrevocably. The Void Swarm would adapt, as they always did, but they would never be the same. And neither would humanity. The price of innovation. The medical bay of the Stellar Dawn was filled with the wounded from Operation Mindstorm. Lieutenant Maya Patel walked between the beds, her own arm in a regenerative cast. The quantum resonance had affected human crews in ways nobody had predicted. Some pilots reported hearing colors, others seeing sounds. The human mind wasn't meant to process quantum frequencies at such intensity. Dr. Chen sat at a diagnostic station, dark circles under her eyes as she reviewed the data. "The Void Swarm is adapting faster than we anticipated," she announced as General Rivera entered. "They're developing resistance to our quantum discord patterns. Worse, they're learning to use our own creativity against us." Recent encounters had shown the Void Swarm incorporating elements of human artistic patterns into their attacks. What had started as a vulnerability was becoming a weapon in their arsenal. "How long do we have?" Rivera asked, his face weathered by months of constant warfare. 2 weeks, maybe 3, before our current tactics become ineffective," Dr. Chen replied. "We need something new, something they can't adapt to." The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Amira Rashid burst into the medical bay, her tablet displaying complex quantum formulas. "We've been thinking about this all wrong," she declared. "We shouldn't be trying to maintain our advantage. We should be sacrificing it deliberately." The room fell silent as she explained her theory. The Void Swarm's greatest strength was their ability to adapt and incorporate new patterns. But what if that strength could be turned into a weakness? "We let them adapt," Dr. Rashid continued, her eyes bright with intensity. "We feed them patterns, let them incorporate our chaos. But each pattern is designed to create instability when combined with the others, like a quantum virus." "You're talking about weaponizing our own failure," Maya realized, "making our defeats part of the strategy." The plan was dangerous, perhaps suicidal. It would require deliberately losing battles, sacrificing ships and crews to feed the Void Swarm's specific patterns of human creativity. Each defeat would plant a seed of destruction within the enemy's collective consciousness. The Meridian High Command was horrified. "This strategy violates every principle of warfare we know," Valor protested. "The casualties would be enormous." "That's why it will work," General Rivera countered. "The Void Swarm understands your principles. They've never encountered a species willing to sacrifice everything for victory." The next month was the bloodiest of the war. Human and Meridian ships engaged the Void Swarm in seemingly chaotic battles across the galaxy. To most observers, it appeared the Alliance was losing badly. Ships were destroyed by the dozens, colonies were lost, and the enemy grew stronger with each victory. But those watching closely noticed something else. With each defeat, the Void Swarm's movements became more erratic. Their perfect coordination showed subtle flaws. They were incorporating human patterns at an unprecedented rate, exactly as planned. The cost was devastating. Maya lost half her squadron in a single engagement. Dr. Chen worked until she collapsed, trying to perfect the quantum patterns they were feeding the enemy. The medical bays filled with crews suffering from ever-stranger quantum exposure symptoms. "We're not just fighting with our weapons anymore," Maya told her remaining pilots. "We're fighting with our minds, our creativity, our very humanity. And we're giving it to them piece by piece." The turning point came during the Battle of Proxima Centauri. The Void Swarm arrived in overwhelming force, their forms now a twisted reflection of human artistic patterns. They expected another easy victory. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. Dr. Rashid's quantum virus activated. All the patterns the Void Swarm had absorbed began to interact, creating cascading failures in their quantum structure. Ships that appeared to be retreating were actually moving into carefully calculated positions, broadcasting specific frequencies that triggered the destructive combinations. "It's working," Dr. Chen reported, monitoring the quantum readings. "The chaos is exponential now. They can't control it." But victory seemed Pyrrhic. A third of the Alliance fleet was destroyed. The survivors showed signs of permanent quantum exposure. Even the Meridian ships, designed to handle spatial distortions, were heavily damaged. In the aftermath, as the survivors regrouped at asteroid base Prometheus, the full impact of their strategy became clear. They had won the battle, perhaps even turned the tide of the war, but at a terrible cost. The human crews had been changed by their prolonged exposure to quantum frequencies. Some reported strange dreams, others developed almost precognitive reflexes. "We're evolving," Dr. Chen explained during an emergency council meeting. "The quantum exposure is changing us at a genetic level. We're becoming something new, something that exists partially in normal space and partially elsewhere." General Rivera stared out at the fleet, watching repair crews swarm over the battle-scarred ships. "Can it be reversed?" "I don't think we should reverse it," Dr. Rashid interjected. "This could be our final advantage. The Void Swarm is vulnerable now, but they're also desperate. They'll try something dramatic. We need to be ready." Maya touched the strange patterns that had begun appearing on her skin, geometric shapes that seemed to shift when viewed directly. "So we're becoming like them to defeat them." "No," Dr. Chen corrected. "We're becoming something entirely new. Something that combines human chaos with quantum understanding. The question is, are we ready to pay the final price for victory?" The answer came sooner than anyone expected. Long-range sensors detected a massive Void Swarm force gathering, larger than any seen before. They weren't just coming for revenge. They were coming to end the war once and for all. General Rivera surveyed his transformed crews, his changed fleet, his evolved species. "Send word to Earth," he ordered. "Tell them to begin the final evacuation. If we're going to end this, we'll need everything we have. Every ship, every crew, every ounce of humanity we have left." The final battle was approaching, and with it the ultimate test of humanity's greatest strength. Their willingness to sacrifice everything they were to become something new. Rising from the ashes, Earth glowed blue and green in the viewport of the stellar dawn, perhaps for the last time. The evacuation ships streamed from the planet's surface like falling stars in reverse, carrying the remainder of humanity to the waiting fleet. Lieutenant Maya Patel watched them ascend, the quantum patterns on her skin pulsing with shared anxiety from her transformed crew. "Final evacuation group is away," she reported to General Rivera. The command deck of the flagship was eerily quiet, filled with both human and Meridian officers whose forms now blurred the line between matter and energy. Dr. Chen's voice came through the quantum comm, tinged with harmonics that echoed in their minds. "The Void Swarm is accelerating. They'll be here in 6 hours. Their pattern suggests they're attempting to harness the chaos we introduced into their collective consciousness. They're not just coming to fight," Dr. Rashid added from her station. "They're coming to consume. They've realized they can't adapt to our patterns without taking all of us. Every human, every memory, every spark of creativity." The combined fleet of humanity, and the Meridian Alliance stretched across the solar system. Every ship had been modified with the latest quantum technologies, their crews transformed by exposure into hybrid beings that existed in multiple states simultaneously. They were no longer purely human, but they had retained the one thing the Void Swarm couldn't replicate: their essential humanity. General Rivera studied the tactical display, where the approaching Void Swarm appeared as a writhing mass of quantum distortions. "Dr. Chen, is the Crucible ready?" "As ready as it can be." She gestured to the massive structure orbiting Jupiter, built from the combined knowledge of human creativity and Meridian technology. "But sir, once we activate it, there's no going back. The quantum cascade will affect everything in the solar system, including Earth," Maya added softly. Rivera nodded grimly. "That's why we evacuated. Humanity's cradle may burn, but its children will survive." The plan was both brilliant and terrible. The Crucible would create a quantum resonance field encompassing the entire solar system, using the Sun's magnetic field as an amplifier. When the Void Swarm entered, they would be trapped in a space where the very laws of physics were rewritten by human creativity and chaos. "All ships, battle positions," Rivera ordered. "Remember your training. Remember what we're fighting for. And remember, what we're about to do has never been attempted in the history of the galaxy." The wait was excruciating. Maya used the time to check on her squadron, now composed of pilots who could mentally link with their ships. The quantum patterns on their skin had evolved into complex mandalas, each unique, each telling the story of their transformation. The Void Swarm arrived like a tear in reality itself. Their forms had changed dramatically, incorporating fractals of human art and creativity into their structure. They were beautiful in their terrible way, a dark mirror of what humanity had become. "They're broadcasting," Dr. Chen reported. "Not just quantum patterns. They're trying to communicate." The message echoed through their transformed consciousness. "We are your future. Your CAOs TOMPLETs US. Surrender and be prepared of perfection." General Rivera's response was immediate. "Humanity doesn't submit to perfection. We break it. All ships, execute Operation Phoenix. Now." The battle erupted across the solar system. Human ships moved in impossible patterns, their transformed crews operating on both physical and quantum levels simultaneously. The Void Swarm responded with equal complexity, using the chaos they had absorbed to match their opponents' unpredictability. But this was exactly what humanity had planned for. "Crucible activation in 3 minutes," Dr. Rashid announced. "All ships, begin your approach vectors." Maya led her squadron in a series of maneuvers that would have been impossible for their original human forms, drawing the Void Swarm deeper into the solar system. Each engagement was precisely calculated to position the enemy exactly where they needed them. 1 minute to activation. Dr. Chen's voice resonated through the quantum network. "Be advised, the transformation will be total. Everything within the field will be changed at the fundamental level." Rivera's voice was steady. "It's been an honor serving with all of you. Whatever we become after this, remember who we were." The Crucible activated. The space between planets lit up with impossible colors as quantum fields intersected. The Sun's magnetic field carried the resonance throughout the system, creating a web of reality-altering energy. The Void Swarm, caught in the field, tried to retreat but found themselves trapped by the very chaos they had absorbed. Maya watched in awe as space itself began to transform. Ships, crew, and Void Swarm alike were caught in the quantum cascade. The boundaries between matter and energy, between consciousness and reality, began to blur. "It's working." Dr. Chen's voice was filled with wonder. "The quantum field is stable. We're not just changing them. We're changing everything." The transformation was beyond anything they had imagined. Human consciousness, enhanced by their quantum evolution and driven by their boundless creativity, began to merge with the fabric of space-time itself. The Void Swarm, unable to resist the change, found themselves being incorporated into a new form of existence. Earth, bathed in the quantum field, shimmered like a jewel in space. The planet wasn't destroyed. It was transformed, becoming a nexus of this new reality. When the light faded, the solar system had become something entirely new. Humanity had not just defeated the void swarm, they had transcended both victory and defeat. They had become guardians of a new form of existence, where consciousness and cosmos were one, where creativity and chaos danced in eternal balance. Maya looked out at the transformed space with new senses that defied description. She could feel the presence of every crew member, every ship, even the transformed void swarm entities, all part of a vast network of consciousness that stretched across the solar system. What have we become? She wondered aloud. Dr. Chen's answer came not in words but in shared understanding. They had become what humanity had always been destined to be, the bridge between order and chaos, the guardians of creativity in a universe that sought perfection. The Meridian Alliance observers, watching from the edge of the solar system, transmitted their findings to their homeworlds. Humanity had not just won a war, they had changed the very nature of existence itself. The galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere in the quantum web that Earth had become, the first stirrings of new life were beginning. Life that would carry the spark of human creativity to the stars in ways no one could have imagined. The war was over. The transformation was complete. And humanity's greatest adventure was just beginning.